Harmless? Well, it's still legal.
The Cary Harrison Files. CaryHarrison.com.
And it is the Cary Harrison Files, CaryHarrison.com. Live streaming right now on Substack and YouTube. Simply Google Cary Harrison Substack or YouTube or anything with a chip and a signal. You'll see it on there, including Instagram. And don't forget to get our newsletter at CaryHarrison.com. There you're going to get a transcript of this entire broadcast so you can reread in finer detail, including some stuff we didn't have time for in the previous interview about the latest on the Epstein files and what you need to know about it. Well, friends and patriots, media quaffers, I want you to lend me your ears, your spinal columns, and whatever gray matter the algorithm hasn't yet composted into TikTok sludge. I come to you today, not with grievance, not with the usual righteous howl into the void that passes for discourse in these times. Nope, not today. Today I come bearing good news, gospel even, the kind that ought to have these Bible-thumping, flag-humping, God-and-gavel politicians on their feet, weeping tears of pure theological joy. Because, and I want you to sit down for this, maybe loosen the flag pin so the blood can still reach the brain. Trans people have done the impossible. Finally, they have solved the gay problem. Now, you got to stick with me because this is where the irony gets so thick you could spread it on a campaign contribution. The fellas in the marble buildings, the ones who've spent 30 years losing their absolute minds over who's doing what to whom in which bedroom and at what angle. These geniuses, these titans of moral governance, have apparently looked at the rainbow and seen only threat, only chaos, only the apocalyptic horror of two men holding hands in a Cracker Barrel parking lot, for God's sake. Fine. We've all noted it, and we've moved on. But here's what nobody in that particular brain trust seems to have noticed. And I mean nobody, from the marble steps to the AM radio dial to the guy in the trucker hat who is absolutely certain the devil invented gender-neutral bathrooms. A trans woman who dates a man is dating a man. That's it. In a nutshell, that's the whole theological miracle they've been stepping over on their way to the pulpit. She used to be, in the parlance of the previously panicked, a gay man. Now, post-transition, she's a straight woman, dating straight, doing straight things, buying straight groceries, having straight arguments about whether the dishwasher was loaded correctly. The straightening has occurred. And similarly, buckle up, because this one's even better. A trans man who likes women was once, by the former taxonomy, a lesbian, a card-carrying indigo girls appreciating Subaru driving sapphic lesbian, and now a straight man dating women, precisely as God, Hallmark, and the Heritage Foundation intended. By the theological math these people invented themselves, the trans community is the single most powerful conversion therapy program in human history, and it's voluntary. No electrodes, no shame retreats in the Idaho wilderness, no binders full of Bible verses delivered by a man who's definitely not wrestling with something. Just people living authentically, landing in the arms of the opposite sex, exactly as the culture warriors demanded. The culture warriors asked for this. They screamed for it. They wrote legislation about it. They gave money to organizations about it. They wept about it in church parking lots. And then the universe actually delivered. When the glorious machinery of human self-actualization produced the exact heterosexual pairing that they'd been begging Jesus for. Well, they lost their minds. Because here's where we arrive at the core diagnosis. These are not people motivated by outcomes. These are people motivated by targets. The goal was never straight relationships. The goal was somebody to be mad at. And the trans community, bless every gorgeous, complicated, courageous one of them, simply refused to be that, quietly. So now we have the spectacular, majestic, historically unprecedented situation of a government actively fighting the very outcome it claimed to want. It's like banning umbrellas because you hate getting wet. It's a masterpiece. It's a Picasso painted in pure spite. And I mean that as the highest compliment to the universe's sense of humor. Now, let's be honest, because that's what this little corner on the FM radio dial is for. The truth underneath all of it isn't complicated. These are human beings who looked at the blueprint they were handed at birth and said, this doesn't fit, and did the terrifying, the brave, the often painful work of living in their actual skin. That's not ideology. It's not agenda. It's just being a person. The oldest and most exhausting occupation on earth. And if you read Plato or Socrates, that's what they told you to do every day. Be yourself, live in your skin, be congruent with your nature. So here it is. And the irony, the delicious, crystalline, 100-proof irony, is that by living authentically, a significant portion of them ended up in heterosexual relationships. Not because anyone told them to, not because of incentives or legislation or the gentle jackboot of social pressure, but because that's who they are. And the people who should, by their own stated logic, be handing out certificates and throwing parades and commissioning statues are instead losing sleep over which bathroom they use.
Bing, boom, right under the toilet. Bing, boom.
We can't buy satire this good. You can't write it. You can only report it with the appropriate level of bewildered, exhausted awe. The trans community didn't ask to become the greatest accidental argument for the thing their enemies wanted. They just showed up. They just lived their lives, and in doing so, held a mirror up to every fraudulent, fear-soaked, politically cynical inch of the opposition. And the reflection was devastating. So here's to them, every single one, the most elegant, unintentional, and thoroughly merciless satirists of the modern age. And they weren't even trying. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Files, CaryHarrison.com and GoHarrison.com. Live video streaming on YouTube and Substack, everything with a chip and a signal. Shortcut at kpfk.net. You can later listen as a podcast across every single service. Simply Google Cary Harrison or the Cary Harrison Files. Don't forget our newsletter with a transcript of this entire show, especially what's coming up and stuff we can't say on the radio, is at Cary, C-A-R-Y, Harrison, or GoHarrison.com. Now, here's how the Department of Health, and we're going to talk about that because it covers everything if you are a live, upright mammal. And we're going to talk first about the DL, the down low, the shadow lane, the I'm absolutely not gay, but let's not discuss what I did last Thursday demographic that has somehow never made it into a Gallup poll, despite representing, I want you to really absorb this number, a substantial chunk of the sexually active American male population. Down low, or as they like to call it now, it makes it fancier, discreet.
How'd it happen?
She showed up dead on arrival.
This never gets easier.
It does when you call CarShield before your car breaks down. Look at these prices. The camshaft, transmission, engine.
Don't people know? A plan through CarShield could protect up to 5,000 parts and systems.
You hate to see it.
An out-of-warranty car is going to break down eventually.
Right, which is why they need a plan through CarShield.
Best of all, you'll get access to CarShield's concierge service, who can even help you find a mechanic near you.
They're notifying the family.
Poor guy. He doesn't even know what's coming.
Another victim of senselessly expensive repair bills. Can't save them all.
But we can keep trying. Didn't have to end this way. If he'd have just called CarShield before his car broke down.
Exactly.
CarShield has an A rating with the Better Business Bureau and was voted America's most trusted auto protection company. It's time to call CarShield now. Call 800-786-8390. 800-786-8390. Call 800-786-8390.
Discreet. Okay. For the uninitiated, and your innocence is a gift, so hold on to it while you can. The down low or discreet refers to a specific, thriving, highly motivated subset of the American heterosexual male who has a wife, a mortgage, a truck with a flag on it, a bowling league, possibly a podcast about red meat, and who is also, on a semi-regular basis, sleeping with trans women. Not instead of his wife, in addition to. And then going home for the pot roast. Now, before you gasp, and I can hear you gasping, let me explain why this arrangement has, from a purely logistical standpoint, an almost architectural elegance. Chad, let's call him Chad, because there are so many Chads. Chad has done the math. Chad has surveyed the landscape. And Chad has arrived at the trans woman not in spite of his self-image, but because of it. Here's the geometry of Chad's reasoning, and it's beautiful in the way that a Rube Goldberg machine is beautiful. Technically impressive, completely unnecessary, and ultimately heading off a cliff. Point one, a trans woman cannot get Chad pregnant. Now, this is not a small thing. This is foundational. Chad is not trying to explain a second family to his wife, his HR department, or his pastor. Chad has dependents. Chad has a 529 plan. The last thing Chad needs is a biological surprise requiring a lawyer and a very uncomfortable Thanksgiving. The trans woman has, through no design of her own, solved Chad's primary logistical concern. She is in Chad's internal risk assessment spreadsheet. Say that word 12 times quickly. In Chad's internal risk assessment spreadsheet, she is a low liability situation. Point number two, Chad has convinced himself, this is so important, he's not cheating. Think about it. What is the greatest gift that a man can tell himself is he's not cheating? All those vows, all the looking over your shoulder, all the being discreet on the down low, you're just not cheating. I know. So let's unpack this. In Chad's internal legal brief, and Chad has apparently retained himself as counsel, it's not really cheating because it's not a woman. It's adjacent. It's a category exception. It's like how some people don't count calories in beverages, like Diet Coke. The rule exists, but Chad has found a loophole, annotated it, and had it notarized. Point three for Chad. He's convinced himself he's not gay, because this is the part where the logic train goes full Wile E. Coyote off the mesa. Because, you see, she's a woman. She identifies as a woman. She presents as a woman. She is a woman. So Chad, who is attracted to women, is simply attracted to a woman. The fact that this particular woman was born with a, in Chad's cosmology, is merely a technicality, right? A footnote, a rounding error in the spreadsheet of his heterosexuality. You see, Chad's not gay. Chad's not bi. Chad is a man of nuance, and Chad is getting laid. Meanwhile, his wife is watching Dateline and wondering why he seems so relaxed when he comes home from these conferences. Now, here's where the farce becomes a thriller. Our leadership, the really stable genius wing of Washington, D.C., working in beautiful concert with the great state of Florida, has decided in its infinite and terrifying wisdom to cut HIV medications for transgender people. Let's let that sentence finish its journey through your nervous system. HIV medications for trans people. Cut them. Florida, home of the hanging Chad, coincidence. The meth pelican, the man who brought a live alligator to Wendy's. Florida has decided that trans people don't deserve the antiviral medications that keep HIV suppressed, non-transmissible. And here's the medical term, not spreading through the general population like a brush fire in a drought. Washington, in its ongoing effort to prove that no active ideological self-destruction is too expensive if the cruelty is sufficiently theatrical, has backed these cuts with the serene confidence of a man who has never once read an epidemiology report. You see where this is going? Because Chad, you see, is still out there. Chad didn't get the memo about the medication cuts. Chad doesn't read public health bulletins. Chad is on his third burner phone, and he's busy. And the trans woman that Chad has been visiting, the one who until recently was on PrEP or antivirals, whose viral load was undetectable, which means untransmissible, which means the entire encounter was, from a public health standpoint, actually safer than a lot of what's happening in Chad's regular life. And that trans woman has now, courtesy of Florida's visionary governance, potentially lost her medication, which means her viral load is no longer undetectable, which means the untransmissible is now transmissible, which means Chad, good old flag truck bowling league pot roast dinner Chad, is now a vector. And Chad goes home. And Chad goes home to his wife in a state of 29 million people. This is right in alignment with making measles kill again, isn't it? The epidemiologists, the ones who haven't been fired yet, and that's a shrinking group, let me tell you, they have a term for what happens when you remove antiviral access from a population that is sexually connected, even indirectly to the general public. They call it a transmission event. I call it Florida's gift to the heterosexual community. Wrapped in a bow of ideology and tied with a ribbon of stunning, malignant, award-winning ignorance. The down low population, discreet, which is not a fringe group, which is not a coastal anomaly, which is load-bearing infrastructure in the sexual architecture of this country. The DL population continues its activity because the down low population doesn't stop. That's definitional. That's what the down low means. And these men go home to their wives, to their unaware wives, women who haven't done anything wrong except trust their husbands and not realize that the sales conference in Orlando involved a very different kind of closing. These people hurt most by this policy aren't who the architectures of it think they're hurting. They've aimed at Brenda and they've shot their own base again. And it'd be funny if it weren't a public health emergency dressed up as a culture war. The truly spectacular part is that the men lobbying hardest for these cuts, the ones beating the pulpit about protecting the family, protecting women, protecting the sanctity of the American home, statistically, they know exactly where the risk is coming from because some of them are the risk. They're not protecting their wives. They're protecting their secret. Oops. Back to the first half of the show, Epstein Files. And in protecting their secret, they've made their wives exponentially less safe. That's not conservatism. That's not Christianity. That's not even coherent. That's just Chad with a gavel. And trans women were the harm reduction the system didn't know it needed. And the leadership that couldn't locate public health with a GPS and a flashlight has now removed harm reduction from a population of 29 million. The out-medicated, legally protected, socially integrated trans woman was a gift to the whole system, a gift to the wives, a gift to the DL men who weren't going to stop anyway, a gift to the public health infrastructure of an entire state. In just a second, we're going to bring on an awesome, brilliant mind, a transgender woman who's going to help wrap her head around the loss of the HIV meds and how we can actually look at it. Cary Harrison, by the way, this is the Cary Harrison Files, CaryHarrison.com. or GoHarrison.com, live video streaming on YouTube, Substack, anything with a chip and a signal, or a video shortcut at kpfk.net. You can later listen as a podcast across every service. Simply Google Cary Harrison, Cary, or the Cary Harrison Files. And don't forget our newsletter with a transcript of this entire show and stuff we can't say on the radio is CaryHarrison.com or GoHarrison.com. Now, before I bring in my guest, I need to prepare you. Some of you are going to hear what I'm about to say and drive your car directly into a ditch. I'd ask you to pull over first. For liability reasons, my guest today is a senior advisor to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, I know half of you just choked on something. The progressive half is already composing an angry email. The MAGA half is confused but intrigued, the way a golden retriever is confused by a ceiling fan but can't stop watching it. The senior advisor to Bobby Kennedy, the man now occupying a cabinet-level position in the administration of his imperial kumquat, the really stable genius of Washington, D.C., the ideological fortress currently legislating trans people out of existence, that senior advisor is a trans woman. Not adjacent to trans, not trans-curious, not, well, she dresses a little. Trans, like fully, like gloriously, like unapologetically. And the administration that has declared biological war on every gender non-conforming human being on the continent, the one stripping healthcare, yanking medication, scrubbing the word transgender from federal documents like a typo from a drunk intern, that administration has a trans woman in the advisory room, helping write the speeches. To this administration, she represents the complete anthology of existential horror. She is the gender traitor, the genital inverter, the living, breathing repudiation of everything their base has been told to fear. If you showed her photo to the average attendee at a certain kind of rally, they'd burn the venue down by accident. And yet, she's still in the meeting. That's not irony. Irony is too small a word. She's also, because she's so bright, the first transgender woman to run for the United States Congress against Nancy Pelosi in Pelosi's own district. She's Stanford, she's MIT, and she's being financially destroyed with apparent joy by high-end shoe stores to boot. Bianca von Krieg, I want to welcome you to the most logical, illogical conversation you're going to have all week.
Hi, it's great to be back. And that was quite a monologue.
But let's just jump right into the gold standard policy section of Bianca von Krieg. Florida just gutted HIV medication access for trans people. You've been living at the intersection of trans advocacy and public health politics for years. Why do the current departments of health want to kill people? Does this feel like, or is it like, I mean, am I getting this wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
The last thing we want to do is kill people. As a matter of fact, we're highly invested in keeping people living as long as possible.
So with that said, why would the department, you're not the department, you're a senior advisor, why remove HIV meds if you want people to stay alive, undetectable, and not run afoul of the body going into mayhem?
Well, I can't be completely sure why HHS did that. I don't think they would ever do something like that. It seems like the state of Florida did it.
But they have.
They have. What antivirals?
Well, let's look at measles, for instance, in South Carolina. I mean, why would you, if you knew it was there, why would one make the decision not to protect the public from getting measles? Unless I'm wrong.
Well, in the case of like Texas, it was mostly these Mennonite populations that did it on religious reasons. The United States government is not telling people not to get the vaccine. They're just changing the age at which it's suggested. So but
in South Carolina, where the measles outbreak is acute, people are not.
These breakouts do occur periodically too. So they've been happening long before RFK and the Trump administration.
Well, not to the tune of 30 people, not to the tune of 100 people, and not removing HIV meds. It was always a zero HIV policy in this country. And in the state of California, where you and I live, it's free. I mean, nobody sits around without access to these medications. where is the outcry from the mothership of all health, HHS, that Florida with 29 million people is pulling HIV meds, which is going to affect people because they're not going to stop having sex. And they probably don't even know.
Well, they probably won't stop having sex, and I don't think anybody wants anybody to stop having sex, except for some very obscure conservative populations. But this seems like a Florida problem. I know California is dealing with its own issues. It's Governor Gavin Newsom made the decision to take Ozempic off the Medi-Cal rolls, and it's affected 600,000 people very adversely. And it's all because he wanted to have more money for immigrant health care. So
immigrant health care would probably be a good thing, because if one of those immigrants got COVID and walked around and spread it all over the place because they were untreated or didn't have access to a mask or any STI and weren't able to be treated, they're still in the population. They're still walking around. They're still going to the grocery store as a disease vector, which is like Chad in Florida. It doesn't help everyone else having anybody out of control. This is the sort of brilliance of Europe. This is why there's monogamy in marriages. Going back to the Catholic Church in the 1400s, realized that if they instituted monogamy, they could reduce the amount of mysterious syphilis. They didn't know what it was back then, but they would keep men at home, at least by moral law, and reduce the amount of transmissible diseases. So all of it is based and rooted in science. The idea that we're purposely deciding based on, and I still don't understand why, but exposing millions of people to calamitous health situations. Help all of us understand why that's a good thing.
Well, I can't understand why Florida does what it does. I can't understand a lot of the reasons that Florida does the things they do, but that's Florida. And it's an unfortunate decision if they've taken antivirals off their rolls. Those are great medications. I've known that for a lot of years, basically transgender healthcare was to make sure you got STD tested regularly and to try to put you on PrEP. So I don't know that it's evolved that much since then. It seems like society thinks we're mostly good for transmitting STDs, which I couldn't find more offensive.
Well, agreed. And the idea that you're removing the every 3 months testing that anybody on PrEP gets, and remember, we're talking about down low here specifically, because this would be the vector of how this becomes a problem, not only for the poor people that don't get meds, and specifically the law is barring trans people from the meds. Other people might still be able to have access, but trans people specifically are unpeople in the state of Florida. And those unpeople may travel, may drive to another state. Not their fault, but they've been relieved of the burden of health, which makes them not only sick themselves, but things spread. This is why we give medicine to everyone, so that we don't have to worry about our little girl going to the mailbox and getting a letter from a mailman who we look at as brown and we don't want to give him health care. And so he's got a problem, puts it on the letter. She grabs the letter, brings it into the house. The whole family gets it. Like it's just science. Or is it moral?
Well, I don't know really how to respond to any of that, but we don't want to make people sick. Florida does what Florida does. And if the people of Florida don't like that, then maybe they shouldn't elect a man like Ron DeSantis, who is kind of an intellectual midget of sorts.
In beautiful white high heels. So what is the position of the Department of Health and Human Services looking down on a state that is going to make the work of Health and Human Services treble in impact? If suddenly there are millions of people dealing with issues they didn't have to before, isn't Health and Human Services going to feel obligated to deal with that?
Well, somebody's going to have to deal with it at some point, certainly. Probably primarily Florida. But again, we want to see people live long, healthy, happy lives. for as long as possible. If Florida has taken antivirals off of their rolls, that's a very unfortunate, unwise thing to do. I would highly suggest they rethink that measure if it's some way of instituting some kind of transgender population control. That's offensive.
That's what it sounds like to me, because if you pick just one group and pull them out, that group is going to diminish in numbers. Like, you know it. It's not like you didn't think about that. Like, what happens if we take food away from our pets? Well, they starve and die. We now have fewer pets. And this is how they're looking at it. It's definite population control. That's like beyond, well, what
again, it's Florida. Florida gets to,
I know, but
Florida gets to do what Florida gets to do, and it's unfortunate, but they're their own sovereign state, just like California and New York and Texas are.
But it seems at the same time having like federal voter rolls where the government has all kinds of desire to just absolutely mandate, and states have no rights to do anything, you know, sort of cherry pick and choose. It would seem that there would be a compelling interest in Health and Human Services to not have a state of 29 million people go completely rogue and start to depopulate itself, unless ultimately people don't care. And I don't know what that is. I do, you do, but maybe enough people don't care, and that's how they get away with it.
Yeah, well, I think these things happen because the federal government, which should be a beacon of centralized services, right, where best practices rise to the top and are reflected or echoed back to the nation. Unfortunately, the mechanism for that is primarily trust, and the trust has been eroded because people have taken advantage of it before, using things like critical race thinking and certain healthcare measures, which kind of were political in nature and not really grounded in science. And we've had a significant trust erosion. And the thing that really worries us over there is that there's probably going to be another COVID again. And when it happens, is the trust really there, you know, in the federal facilities that will be providing those services? Because if it's not, that's going to be very catastrophic for the nation and the world. So it's important that we come back to a place where we reestablish trust, and we're, you know, kind of these rogue states like Florida or, you know, South Carolina, listen to the best science that we provide. And we do strive to provide the best science at HHS. Okay,
well, let's hear a big megaphone of what that sounds like. And I do appreciate you coming on. I'm so sorry we're out of time. Bianca von Krieg, thank you so much for joining us. MIT, Stanford transgender advisor to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and HHS. Very much appreciate your coming on. Cary Harrison with you. Don't forget to go to CaryHarrison.com, get our newsletter, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week.
The Cary Harrison Files.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? Well, you call low-cost airlines because they specialize in cheap flights, in discount hotel rooms, in cheap car rentals, and with the best price guarantee. Often 75% off. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795.
How'd it happen?
She showed up dead on arrival.
This never gets easier.
It does when you call CarShield before your car breaks down. Look at these prices. The camshaft, transmission, engine.
Don't people know? A plan through CarShield could protect up to 5,000 parts and systems.
You hate to see it.
An out-of-warranty car is going to break down eventually.
Right, which is why they need a plan through CarShield.
Best of all, you'll get access to CarShield's concierge service, who can even help you find a mechanic near you.
They're notifying the family.
Poor guy. He doesn't even know what's coming.
Another victim of senselessly expensive repair bills. Can't save them all.
But we can keep trying. Didn't have to end this way. If he'd have just called CarShield before his car broke down.
It Exactly.
CarShield has an A rating with the Better Business Bureau and was voted America's most trusted auto protection company. It's time to call CarShield now. Call 800-786-8390. 800-786-8390. Call 800-786-8390.